I am live here tonight with Glen Rogers. I learned about her through my friend Cynthia Handel. She was on, I think November. She was on as a guest, and I learned about Glen Rogers through her. Glen is an artist and educator, and with a very adventuresome spirit, which I love, and a reverence for Mother Earth. Her favorite quote is "Sweet and the net world here," and it has propelled her on a life journey of art and discovery. I love that quote. I really do. That is one of my definite. I have to do that a lot.
Yeah.
She has lived and worked in Mexico since 2000 and now splits her time in San Miguel de Allende.
Yes.
And
Mazatlan.
I knew I'd forget it.
Yeah.
You've got it really well. You've been able to accommodate your southern Mississippi drawl to being able to pronounce all of those. So that's really awesome. She has had training at University of Florida in printmaking. Was that also sculpture as well?
What was that?
Did you study sculpture at University of Florida as well?
I've never studied sculpture or painting formally, only printmaking. That was my beginnings. Yeah.
I love that. I'm all for doing whatever feels right.
Right.
Alrighty. I think that is everything, unless you have something to add on that. I'll try to get out of Illustrator. Somehow that popped up. Who knows why? Well, thank you so much for joining me, Glen. I am so happy to have you join me. It definitely sounds like we have a lot of similar interests, from travel to the divine feminine and sacred art. And I really want to let you just dive in and sort of tell me about how you got started and what led you on this path.
Well, let's see. I guess I'll start with my art journey as far as my way of working. I really got into art through printmaking. I mean, I was always an artist, but I really found my way through printmaking at University of Florida. And I fell in love with ink on paper, and I felt like I finally found my way, my path. And then I transferred to San Francisco State, worked with some great artists there, and finally at San Jose State for my MFA. But all along the way, I worked in various studios. I started a studio in San Jose, California, Citadel Print Center, and worked with various artists, and really didn't start painting until much later. And just because I kind of got tired of people saying, "Oh, she's just a printmaker."
Right.
I'm like, okay, I'll show them I can paint too. So that's when I decided to get the canvas out, and then much later I got into sculpture, public sculpture, because I was working full time for many years, as well as getting my master's, maintaining a studio, teaching, and I looked at myself when I was 40, and I said, wait a minute, this is not what I want to be doing, working for this other company, which was a sign and display company, and gave me lots of skills that I realized I could apply to public art, because I was a project manager. And I realized that public artists, we're project managers, because I subcontracted to various craftsmen. And so I started pursuing that, and I was lucky because in San Jose, California, at that moment in time, well, maybe around the country, the whole just of public art was about collaboration and working with artists working with engineers and architects and that sort of thing. And the city of San Jose was giving free seminars on how to do that. In fact, wow. Cynthia was in one of those seminars that I took as well. And so we learned how to, do that collaborative effort and make the proposals and that sort of thing. And anyway, as luck has it, for me, I ended up working with an architect, meeting an architect, and Bill Gould in San Jose, and we worked together for 10 years doing art and architecture projects. It was pretty cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, because I do quite a bit of that, for someone that's just sort of an emerging project manager, what would be your biggest top couple of tips or things that you wish you had known going into it?
I don't know. Let's see. Well, I think, being organized, which I tend to be a very organized person, and pursuing all the help you can get from the various, Office of Cultural Affairs and whatever your city you're working for, other artists who have worked in the field, like I say, architects, engineers. It's helpful to don't try to do it on your own, ask for advice, ask for help, and just pull it together that way. That's the advice I would give.
Well, yes, for sure. So speaking of public art, you have a bench of sorts that you created, right?
Yes.
Do you want to tell us and show us a little bit about that?
Yes, I would love to talk about it. In 2020, well, actually it was 2019, I went to Europe for a show I was in Ghent, Belgium. And then went to Austria with a friend who I was traveling with. She wanted to see her family there. Well, one thing led to another, and her cousin had a sculpture in the sculpture park, brand new sculpture park. And we met the developer, and the sculpture part was lovely, and lots of local artists. And I had just seen the Venus of Willendorf figure, which is 4.5 inches tall, at the Museum of Natural History in Austria. So I was newly, inspired to do a piece on the Venus of Willendorf, which, I knew about for many, many years. And so I ended up making a proposal to this developer, and he agreed. And I'm going to show you, I've got a slide here. Let me see if I can do this correctly. Not that one.
There you go.
There you go. Can you see it?
Mm-hmm. Perfect.
So that's Throne for a Goddess, the sculpture I did. And it was a piece that I created. I did a drawing, I did a model, and then basically everything was done on the computer. I had plenty of help in that regard, I can tell you. And basically they set me up with an artist in Austria who ran this, well, I don't know her exact position, but she was my contact person for the fabrication in Austria. And we worked together back and forth on the computer. And it was just a delightful experience because she's into the goddess imagery as well. And she was excited about seeing this piece in the sculpture park. And she saw it through to the end, through the installation. And of course I wasn't there because of COVID. And I hope to be, hope to do it in the future. So.
Well, it turned out really well.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm really excited about it.
I love the cutouts, how that looks on the back of it and everything. It's just
yeah, that was her idea, to use a different metal front and back, so I could actually have a different, 2 sheets of metal instead of just the same image on front and back. So that
really like that.
That was a great result of the collaboration with us.
It's always nice to have that chance to work with people and get their input.
Yeah.
See things in a different way that you might not have seen to begin with.
Her name is Jitka Derler, by the way, and I can't wait to meet her when I'm.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. Well, speaking of COVID, you being below the border and everything, how has that been for you were you required to leave and come back to the US at all, or were you?
Oh, no, I'm a permanent resident in
Nice.
Mexico. And I was in San Miguel de Allende. And honestly, it was a good place to be. I felt everybody that I was around was following protocol, wearing the mask and staying home as much as possible and that sort of thing. So it went well. I mean, I got tons of work done in the studio. I was able to, you know, because you were forced to spend more time with ourselves. I felt like I grew, you know, spiritually, more attention to my meditation practice and that sort of thing. And so I would say, I hate to say it, but it was good for me. I think there are some people that feel the same way, that we actually got something from the experience, something positive from this really horrible negative experience. So that's the way I see it.
Sometimes I feel like that we might surround ourselves with doing things and seeing other people to the extent that we forget to really connect with ourselves. So that I definitely had the same sort of experience, and I'm glad to hear that you were able to go deeper into your practice as well.
Exactly.
With your with the divine feminine and your meditation practice and everything, spirituality, how did that start working into your artwork? Was that something that the imagery and everything you originally were drawn to, or has that evolved over the years?
It began a long time ago when I was a young artist in my 30s. And I began reading books like When God Was a Woman by Merlin Stone and Chalice and the Blade by Ryan Eisler. And then, and this is information I had known nothing about in my education, as I think it happened for many people, that, you know, in fact, there was matriarchy before patriarchy. This had a huge, huge influence on the way I saw the world. So I was already doing the figure at that point, but it became more, I suppose, feminist in some ways. And I think the spiritual kind of came a little bit later. But that was the beginning. And so the other thing that had a huge influence was a book by Maria Gimbutas. Her work, she's an anthropologist that documented all the symbols from these early cultures, mainly in old Europe, that related to this goddess culture. And that was another step for me. And I began using the symbols, and the symbols kind of took over from the figure for many years. For probably 30 years, I was mainly doing this work that revolved around the spiral, the circle, the moon, you know, all these sacred feminine symbols. So that was my my intro into my path, and I've continued on. Yeah.
I love it. And that has even led you into creating a couple of books and even a oracle deck, correct?
Right. My first book was about my journeys to sacred sites around the world. I'll show you my book. It's called Art and Sacred Sites, Connecting with Spirit of Place. And it's about 10 sites that I went to, mainly to walk in the footsteps of these early goddess cultures, like Knossos in Crete. In Crete, and Newgrange in Ireland. And so that's why I visited these places, just to kind of feel that energy. And then I'd go back to the studio when I came home and do work. And so the book came much, much later, because I realized this is the way I'd been working. You know, I'd been going, traveling, taking pilgrimages and photographing and coming back and working. And then I had these whole bodies of work that related to every sacred site. And then much later in 2014, I did the second book called Symbols of the Spirit. And it's called A Meditative Journey Through Art. And that's kind of documenting the symbols that I used throughout this whole career of work. And it was, again, the circle, the spiral, the moon, the bird, the moon, you know. So, and then during COVID, that was in 2019, I think, that Symbols of Spirit book. And then I decided during COVID, it just came to me during I do journaling every morning. And some of my best ideas come during that time. So I don't know, it just popped in. Do oracle cards, do spirit cards. Like, okay.
I love it.
So here's the cards, and it's a 50 cards deck. And again, I'm using my artwork over 30 years. So I just went through and chose images, 50 images, that because a lot of my work is vertical, so it all fit the format, luckily. And then after going through and choosing the images, then I kind of sat with each one and decided what power word was going to be connected to the image. So, for example, this one is with a bird. It says tranquility.
That one's one of my favorites. That's all on Instagram.
Thanks. So anyway, that's I did that. I worked with the designer because I knew it would be so much better if I did. Same way with my books. I used a professional designer. Marjorie Cantor did the books, and Mary Mead did the cards. And the cards, once I got them, designed and ready, I looked for publishers, but not too hard. I threw it out there a couple of times, and then I said, I'm just going to do it myself. So I used a printer in Mexico City, same way as my last book. And they're just excellent. They did a really good job, and really happy with them.
Nice. That's really cool because, yeah, over 30 years of doing stuff, I'm sure you have like tons and tons of things that would easily fit into any of the different meanings. And
exactly.
That's just really, really cool. Anything else other than working with a designer that you came across while working on your books and on the Oracle decks that you wish you had known or could have, that you definitely needed while you were working on those?
Well, my recommendation to anybody that's going to write, just start, show up at the page. I don't know who said that first, but I love that quote, as far as kind of keeping a steady, flow of your words. But you have to use an editor. I mean, in the end, don't just think you got it down. You need somebody or more than one person with fresh eyes to go over the work and find those mistakes that inevitably happen. So that's what I would say is just and trust yourself, trust your gut that you're doing something that hopefully others will enjoy, and you're putting something of your heart and soul out into the world, and hopefully there will be people, like-minded people.
Sure. And you also have to be willing to, like, if something comes up or someone disagrees with it, you have to just let it roll off.
Yeah. I mean, I think oracle cards are probably not for everyone, so I understand that. But they're also, I think, especially during COVID, I think people really responded because they're home, alone, a lot of them. And, it's just, you can lay this deck out and pick one a day and just have a little source of inspiration or something to think about during the day, whatever that word or image is. And it's just something else that you can add to your daily life, your daily practice.
Right. It's a chance to pause and sort of slow down a little bit, for sure.
Exactly. Yeah.
I definitely like to do that, whether it's one or a couple of different cards or something, and just sort of, a lot of times it helps me journal through some of the things, like picking out certain pieces of the art that allows me to really dive deeper and journal about things that maybe like surface level I wasn't thinking about, but just by looking at the art or that triggering word or something, having that help me work through my subconscious and really bring things to the surface has been really, really nice.
Yeah, and I think that, the combination of word and image touches us at different levels. So if you just had a word, that's fine, and you get a lot from that, but an image may bring something else up that, so in that combination, I think is really rich.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
Definitely. In all of your travels, you've been all to Europe and everything. Is there any specific site that stood out to you that really, really inspired certain pieces, or like are they all sort of mixed in there for you?
Well, I chose my 10 best in that first book. But I have to say, this trip to England that I took, and I think it was 2006 or something, specifically to go to see crop circles.
Oh, wow.
And of course, some of the Neolithic sites as well. But I know in people, I know a lot of people are disbelievers in the crop circle thing, but I felt it was, since, it was a real happening. It was really not human hands making these large scale earthworks in the middle of these fields. And so I wanted to see it for myself. So I went over with a friend, and it's, I really wasn't sure if I'd see any, how do you know you're going to go there? And because, the idea behind the crop circles is they happen overnight, in like 15 minutes. So how do you know? So well, we went over, but I had heard about this place that is called Crop Circle Central, this bar. And so we went there first, and sure enough, you just follow the maps, and I saw 9.
That's wild.
While I was there, and you can't see them from the ground. That's the other amazing thing, because they're so huge, bigger than a football field size, that you can't see the formation. So I had to fly in a little light plane to see it. And again, the pilot, even though he's not, woo-woo at all, he was like, well, I don't know, but all I know is I fly in this direction, and 15 minutes later, I fly back and there's another one.
That is insane.
So, and so anyway, it was exciting. And on that trip, I did not expect to see Stonehenge, because I'd heard that you have to wait, you have to get on a mailing list like a year in advance.
Wow.
And I hadn't done that. So I thought, well, forget that. We're not going to Stonehenge. But we get there, and this is like the biggest flood in 30 years in England.
Oh, well.
I'm at a house sit. I've got this beautiful home on the house sitting, or house exchange, I should say. And so, but people were canceling at Stonehenge because they couldn't come to England. So I won't go through the whole story of how I figured it out, but I ended up at Stonehenge at sunrise.
Oh, wow.
And with about like 9 people. And that just doesn't happen much anymore. And so that and many other magical things happened on that trip.
That's wild. Yeah, I would say definitely Stonehenge is on. It would have to be a definite wish list or bucket list item for me.
Be sure to book it. And, the way I found out about the sunrise thing was I went to the little town of Avebury, which is surrounded by the largest stone circle in England. And at the little tourist shop, I saw a postcard Stonehenge at sunrise. I'm like, oh my God. So keep your eyes and ears open when you're traveling, because you may think, this is going to happen or this can't happen, but you never know. It's synchronicity.
For sure. Do you have any specific like spots that you haven't been able to go to yet that you're like, that's definitely top 10?
I really want to go to Turkey, to some of the, the ancient goddess sites like Ephesus there. I know there are more. So Turkey's calling my name. And if I go to Turkey, I'd probably do Greece again. I went to Greece. And that's one of my sites in my book, The Temple of Knossos on Crete. So I would go back to Greece again and visit other, ancient goddess sites. But Turkey is definitely one of them. Malta, a friend of mine keeps saying, Glenn, you got to go to Malta. It's like a haven of these ancient sites. So yeah, I've got a list.
As well. What do you tend to travel with? Any art supplies or just like a watercolor sketchbook or anything like that? What's your go-to travel kit?
I've tried the watercolor sketchbook thing. It is just not my thing. I even took a workshop with my good friend Susan Dorff, but it's just not my thing. I just, I do, with my pen and paper, I doodle and write down my thoughts and little sketches, but nothing worth showing anybody, it's my own notes.
Right.
But what was I going to say? Oh, photographing. That's the thing is that I can take away is I really spend time, if I can, photographing the place, the symbols, whatever I find on the rocks and, the structures, architecture. And of course, I try to find a special place that I can do a meditation and a little grounding and bringing in the energy. So that's what I do.
Very cool. It's so unique to hear, especially well-traveled people, how they practice art on the road, or if they specifically go for like artist residencies and stuff. So that's really cool. And
yeah.
I agree. Photography, usually, I think my first trip abroad, I took well over 2,000 pictures, and by the third time I went, I was well into 10,000s, like 14,000 pictures. And like 50% is probably all like ironwork and textures, rocks, stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's because especially in Italy, there was so much of the ancient graffiti and like the rock work and everything, and all the temples.
Yeah, that's inspirational, and that's why in the photo we bring the photos back into our studio and then like take off from there. Yeah.
So I definitely still need to like catalog all of them from that trip for sure, but that's something that'll come up because I know which pictures I took.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, let's see. As far as, especially with working with painting, and do you mostly do acrylics or do you do oil at all?
Oil. I don't do acrylic.
Okay.
Yeah, it dries too fast for me. Acrylic dries too fast for me.
And I'm not the complete opposite.
Oh, really? Yeah, I want to play with it a long time.
Nice.
So yeah,
you definitely get a lot of really nice atmospheric like colors and stuff. I like it.
Yeah, I do thin layers of, with linseed oil, and I just build up layers on the paint, on the canvas. Yeah.
Typically, are you working on like multiple paintings at a time? Because I know that's usually my go-to is I have multiple projects, but especially like space-wise, are you able to do that?
Yeah, I have one big painting wall that's like 4 foot by 8 foot. And so if I'm working on small paintings, I can have 3 up. I just did 3, recently, the beginning of in the spring. And that way I can work a little bit, here and there.
Nice.
And I like working that way. And then I'll go and do some prints. And then I'll go back to the painting. And I'll do some prints. So
That's
I
awesome.
like to go back and forth. I like to do small. I like to do large. I'm not very consistent.
I mean, consistency is relative, right?
No, anyway, it's fun.
Yeah, it's nice to just sort of let it speak to you and follow your own path on that for sure.
Right.
I know San Miguel, I have a friend that has lived there for many years as well. And it seems like it's a very vibrant artist community. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. That's why I ended up there. I was in Mazatlan for many years and I love Mazatlan. But there's very few galleries at any given time. And I had a gallery here for a while. I was just so ready for change and to be in a community that was already a vibrant artist community. So I really was looking at other locales like Oaxaca and, other places, but I ended up turning my sights to San Miguel and I really love it. There's tons of galleries, there's tons of good artists. During normal times, there's art openings you can go to, which is one of my favorite things to do. And, and it's beautiful. The architecture is beautiful. I don't know. It's been a good place for me. I built a studio there and got my a new press in and started teaching workshops. And so it's been good for me. And I've been in a number of galleries over the years I've been there. I'm not in one right now, but after COVID, hopefully I'll find, some new spots to show my work.
That's really cool. As far as with Mexico, I'm assuming that pretty much especially with Amazon now, you're able to get whatever equipment and stuff that you need. But is there a large market in that region for art supplies, or do you have to normally get them shipped in?
They usually, I have to get my stuff in the States. Now, there is one good art supply store in San Miguel, which we never had in Mazatlan. We have one, but not the quality of the supplies I use. So, and printmaking, forget it. You can't get the inks in Mexico. So I always would arrange to, when I'm flying up there, have it sent there and bring it in the plane back.
Wow.
My paper, either I fly it back or somebody drives it down. Somebody that's already driving will drive it down for me. That's what I've been used to for the last 20 years.
Wow.
Think ahead. You got to think ahead.
Uh-huh.
You go up, what do I need? What do I need to order? And, but you get used to it.
Yep. Because you need your stuff, so you figure
That's
it out.
right. That's right.
Adapt and evolve.
Right.
Let's see. As far as, especially speaking like as far as Mexico and stuff, you were talking about Oaxaca, that triggered a memory because they have a lot of natural colorant classes and stuff like that. And I've worked with several people that do a lot of travel, especially to sacred sites, and collect pigments from those areas. Have you worked with anything, site as place or pigment as, like reference to place at all?
Nope. I'm not really interested in making my own inks and paints. It's just not what I want to be spending my time on.
Right.
I think it's very interesting. And I love that there are dyeing classes and all, natural dyeing classes there and stuff like that. But no, it's not my thing.
Is there, when you're picking your colors, do you have a specific like color palette in mind when you're going in, or is it just sort of like something that comes to you organically?
Well, for many years, I was using earth tones, siennas and ochres and umbers, black and white, I love. And I challenged myself on an artist residency one time. I went to residency in Spain, Fundación Valparaiso, and I took a tube of blue and I said, I will use this blue. So, and I did a series of paintings that I was really happy with. And so that kind of broke the ice for me to move out of my, totally earth tones. And it was fun. And so now in fact, the last paintings I did were these blue, totally blue, monochromatic figurative pieces.
Oh, wow.
I'm into blues and the earth tones now.
Nice. I mean, that is earthy too, to an extent sometimes.
Yes,
So
yes,
it definitely flows right into it for sure.
Right, right.
I totally didn't have time to write down my questions, so I was
Okay.
taking me a few minutes in between. Printmaking processes. What has definitely been some of your favorite ones to work with, and or maybe some that you haven't had a chance to try out and you would like to?
I started out as an etcher. Fell in love with etching. I loved working on the metal, scratching, acid bites. I fell in love with that. And so that's what I did for many years. But I think it was when I was teaching, and I had an artist residency gig at some schools, and all of a sudden I had 1 hour to teach printmaking to kids, high school kids. And so I thought, I could do dry point. I did do dry point with them, which is to scratch into the metal. But I also decided to do monoprint, which I had never done before, really. I was an etcher, so I taught myself monoprinting, and then that's what I taught the students. And after a while, I'm like, God, why would I want to do etching when I can do monoprint all the time? Because it's so fluid and spontaneous, and I don't need an edition of prints.
Right.
5, 10, or 20. I don't need that. So I love the one of a kind, the uniqueness of monoprint. And that's been my thing for probably 20, 25 years. That's what I teach in my workshops. I do still use the dry point. I scratch into my acrylic plates, and it's a big part of my textural imagery. But after that, then I do layers. I usually start with a key plate, black or umber or whatever my dark color is, sienna, and then print that, and then decide where I want colors to go. And I do transparent colors over that, so they don't affect those original black and white, black key plate. And you get a real richness, it's bold. I like the boldness of it. And that's my way.
I like that. I've been experimenting more with dry point the past year and a half, I guess, on plexiglass. And I've always, I guess probably because of screen printing mostly, I always put my key image on top. And so I was wondering how you were getting some of those, the black seems so deep in the colors. And so now knowing that completely, it makes sense.
Yeah. I'll show you my last 2 big prints. Hold on a second. These are the last 2 big prints. These are 30 inches by 22 inches. And, they're very, I feel they're very kind of mystical, meditative, coming out of COVID. But they're also very feminine. They have the feminine shape, the cubic triangle. And, but yeah, I did the black first. And then I did several layers of the reds and the pinks and the oranges. And then that circle in the circles are stencils. Ever since I went to Morocco to residency there a couple years ago, I picked up these stencils.
Oh, wow.
And I've been using them, and I don't know, I'm still loving them.
Mhm.
So that's my last two big prints.
Nice. I really like those. Now it totally makes a lot of sense because I was like, what is she doing in those corners? Like, is it all mezzotint or how is she getting it all to work?
See, that's a good point, because in etching, it's sometimes very difficult to get those blacks that to keep that aqua tint and that mezzotint, maybe not mezzotint, but that aqua tint to really hold, you know, the black. So here you pile on the ink and you got black.
That's awesome. Typically, what are you using? Like the Akua, or do you have a different brand that you prefer?
No, I do not use Akua. I should be. No, I know. It's just, you know, Akua, for those that don't know, is water-based, and it's non-toxic. But I'm stuck in my ways. I love my oil-based etching inks. I still use Graphic Chemical and Ink Company, which is the first ink that I ever used in printmaking. But it still works for me, and I love the richness of colors. And for me, the way I work, I work very much like wiping an etching. I wipe the ink on there, and I use a tarlatan to take it off a lot of times, and a rag. So it's those original processes that kind of inform the way I work. But yeah, I actually have a little press here in Mazatlan that I brought with me, and I have some Akua inks. I'm going to try to make myself use them because I'm here for a month. So I'm gonna try to make myself, and just, you know, challenge. It's a big challenge.
I definitely, when I teach it at Shepherd and stuff, mixing it with a little bit of the magnesium carbon magnesium or something, whatever is normally that you thicken etching inks with.
Okay. Magnesium carbonate.
Yes, thank you.
Oh, okay. I haven't heard that because it's too liquidy. It's so liquidy.
Yeah, it works great for relief printmaking, but to be able to card it in place and everything, I did like a 50, you can do less or more, but it was about 50-50, like a tablespoon of ink to a tablespoon of the magnesium carbonate.
Okay, so that's a good tip.
It definitely helped a lot. But I completely agree. Like graphic chemicals, you can't beat that, like that richness and the depth of those tones that you can get with all of that.
Yeah.
It's really wild. I have used some of, I think right before Daniel Smith went completely to painting supplies, they had a line of water soluble, mostly like soy based. And to me, it's still better than the Speedball Professional relief inks and stuff that they have, but you can't get it anymore. So I'm like being very, very careful of how, you know, everything.
Yeah, I've never tried those. Yeah.
And that's interesting because I always like try to figure out what everybody else is using and what their preferences are. But graphic chemicals is a definite wonderful go-to.
Yeah. And, you know, as far as the toxicity in the studio, when I teach, I use vegetable oil to clean up instead of solvent. And we use very little solvent, you know, and so I don't think it's, you know, it's bad for you. We wear gloves as much as we can, you know, all that stuff. So I think it's a non-issue to me as far as it. I mean, I don't think I'd be able to teach in a high school with the graphic, but in my own studio or whatever. Yeah.
We were still using that mostly at UMD, University of Maryland, while I was still in grad school. And those kids, sometimes it would just be spread everywhere. And so they've actually stopped selling mineral spirits and stuff here in Maryland. So
oh, wow.
Yeah, it's completely off the shelf. And so I
Wow.
had a small reserve. Like I have my own, and then I also had a small one
Yeah.
that they were able to get for the school. And so like once a year I would clean everything top to bottom with a little bit of solvent just to
Yeah.
break through the
Yeah.
grunge.
Yeah. Oh, wow. I did not know that that was, you couldn't buy it.
I think most all of the states that like Georgia and West Virginia and stuff, they still have it. But I don't know, maybe the Chesapeake Bay or something. I don't know. Some of the tributaries. It's definitely interesting. Um, have you done any lithography since you're so close to New Mexico and everything?
No, I did in graduate school, and I did love the, you know, the pencil on the stone. I love the feel of that, but it, you know, what I found was that it did not allow for mistakes.
Right.
And I love letting things flow and accidents happen and one thing leads to another. And in lithography, if you make a mistake, it just doesn't print.
It can be just a big black spot.
Yeah, so that did not work for me, even though I love the drawing of it, you know, the feel of the drawing.
That was when I started doing photo transfers onto lithography stones. That was probably one of the first times that I really started like letting the process happen and allowing
Okay.
for mistakes in undergrad. And there was a couple of times where I was just like, why? But tell me a little bit about how like that mantra, the like leaping and letting the net catch you, or you'll be able to just like go into and explore and not really worry about things, because that's, I know, especially younger artists and especially myself, that's something I've struggled a lot with, is being able to just let go and allow the process to happen. So did you struggle at all with that, or was it just something that flowed naturally for you?
Well, I think in the etching process originally, I started experimenting with textures, you know, like weird things like putting some asphaltum on it and then blowing it and, you know, just letting things happen. And so I really tried to not do this really tight thing that, you know what I mean, that didn't have any feeling. I really tried to let the process lead me. And that's, again, that's why I like monoprint, because in monoprinting, when I start a piece, when I approach my, you know, my palette, whatever, my plate, I usually have an idea, you know, maybe I'm going to play off of this photograph I had, you know, from one of my sites that I visited or something like that. But after that, I'm not attached to it anymore. Once I start, the ink kind of takes over, and that's when something really good comes out, is when something that you couldn't have thought of yourself emerges from the plate, emerges from the ink. And that's when it is magical. And that's why I'm so dedicated to that process.
I love that.
I've done I used to do a lot of photo etching. And I've done the solar plates, you know. I actually had Dan Weldon come and teach a workshop here in my studio in Mazatlan. And I like that, but again, I wasn't able to make it go further for me. Dan does it very well, but for me, it was too tight and too rigid. But I do the transfers. I do photo transfers a good bit, and I do like that, because then I can put the monoprint over it and you know, the ink. So that's, yeah.
Do you have any big projects that you're about to start, or like you're in the middle of?
Not really. I just come back from a 2.5 week trip through the Southwest, driving from Mexico all the way up and around with some friends. And and I'm still sitting with those images that I saw and places that I visited and people and friends and family. And so, but I'm here in Mazatlan for a month. So I'm just going to, like I said, I've got that little press. I'm going to do some things, but I don't really have a big looming project ahead of me. But I would like one. I'm always thinking, what's the next big thing?
Right.
But I don't know yet.
That's always how it goes. There's either too many things going on at one time,
Yeah.
or there's a lull. So, but that's definitely a perfect time for you to like work through some of the new things that you've seen and even bring up some old stuff. I always like looking through old sketchbooks and journals at that point for sure.
Yeah.
As far as that thought just went somewhere. Oh yeah. Do you have any specific meditations that you like? I've found that I really like Live Awake on SoundCloud. Do you have any recorded ones that you really like, or do you mostly work with internal stuff?
On a regular basis, I use a site. What is it called? I'm gonna look real quick because I can't remember. Insight Timer.
Oh, nice.
Insight Timer. But I don't normally use the guided meditations, but I can time. I have my time set. I've chosen my music. And so now I'm just like, once I hear that same music, I just go right into my meditation.
Nice.
I do have some guided meditations that I learned many years ago that I still use, like grounding meditations, that sort of thing. So, and in my book, Symbols of the Spirit, I at the end of each chapter, I did a meditation. So like, here's the meditation on the spiral. You can't see it. But so each chapter has a meditation. So that was really nice to, like the meditation on the seed. Here's manifest what you want in your life. Create the seed of an idea and visualize it in vivid detail. Then let the image go like a bubble into the universe where it can expand and take hold beyond your wildest dreams. Plant the seed and watch it grow. So
That's so lovely.
I enjoyed like creating those, and hopefully people are using them.
For sure. Well, I can't wait to get my hands on some of them for sure. Well, thank you so much, Glenn. I am going to go ahead and let you sign off.
Okay.
And because it's been such a lovely chat and we've had such a lovely time together. And I'll send you the YouTube link, and I think you might already have it, but I'll send the specific link. But definitely, if you have any friends, I will be starting to plan the next season.
Great.
So anybody that's watching this or any of your friends, please let me know. You should be able to contact me either by my email or websites. But thank you so very much. I'm glad you had great travels and you're having a little month of respite while you're before you start moving on to something else.
Yeah. Thank you, Lauren. I really, really appreciate talking with you. We'll talk more offline.
Yeah, sure. Sounds great. Thank you so